The Velari homeworld was dying. Once a thriving planet with towering crystalline cities, vast oceans, and skies filled with shimmering auroras, it had now turned into a land of silence and decay. The streets that were once crowded with life were now empty, littered with the remains of those who had succumbed to the mysterious plague. It came without warning, spreading like wildfire, leaving nothing but suffering in its wake. No cure, no hope. And worst of all, no help. The Galactic Council, the so-called guardians of civilization, had issued a quarantine order and abandoned the Velari to their fate. Other species, once allies, had turned away, fearing the disease might spread to their worlds. The great trade routes that once connected the Velari to the stars were now shut down. Every plea for aid was met with silence, every transmission ignored. The message was clear. The Velari were already considered dead. Grand Chancellor Valen stood in the towering palace overlooking the ruined capital. His once golden robes were now dull and tattered, his once proud face now hollow with exhaustion. He had watched his people fall one by one, powerless to stop it. His scientists had tried everything, but the disease was relentless. It attacked the nervous system, causing unbearable pain before shutting down vital organs. No medicine worked, and those who were infected had only days before the inevitable. Valen had hoped, even prayed, that the great civilizations of the galaxy would send help. The humans, the Silari, the Torkin, anyone, but they had all turned away. It was not just a disease that was killing them, it was betrayal. In a desperate attempt to survive, Valen recorded one final message. His voice trembled, but his resolve remained strong. To anyone who hears this, we are dying. We are abandoned, but we are still here. If there is any mercy left in the galaxy, do not let the Velari fade into darkness. He sent the transmission into deep space, knowing that it would likely be ignored like all the others. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. His people had survived wars, disasters, and even the cold vastness of space. But now, they faced something far worse, being forgotten. Days passed, and the Velari continued to wither. The air smelled of death, and the sky, once a brilliant shade of violet, was now a dull gray, as if mourning the lives it had once sheltered. Valen sat in his chamber, staring at the endless reports of casualties. His hands clenched into fists as he whispered to himself, "Is this how it ends?" But then, something happened. A signal, a faint transmission from the stars, cut through the silence. It was a voice, deep and resolute. "This is Captain Elias Carter of the Turan Republic. Hold on. We are coming." Valen froze, his heart pounding. He replayed the message again, making sure his mind was not playing tricks on him. But it was real. Humanity had answered. The same species that the Galactic Council often mocked for their recklessness, the same species that had been warned to stay out of galactic affairs, had done what no other had dared to do. They had defied the quarantine. They were coming. Within hours, the dark sky above Velari Prime was broken by the arrival of massive human ships. Sleek and formidable, they descended through the toxic atmosphere, their hulls gleaming under the dim sun. Dropships roared through the abandoned streets, deploying teams of doctors, scientists, and soldiers in protective suits. The Velari who were still alive crawled out of their shelters, their eyes filled with disbelief. They had been sure that no one would come, that they were doomed. But here the humans were, standing among them, scanning the sick, setting up medical stations, and speaking words of reassurance. Valen stood at the entrance of the crumbling palace as Captain Carter approached. The human commander was tall, his uniform crisp despite the harsh environment. His eyes were sharp, filled with determination. "Chancellor Valen," he said, offering a gloved hand, "we don't leave people to die." The words hit Valen harder than he expected. He gripped Carter's hand, his voice breaking. You came when no one else would." Carter nodded. "Because it's the right thing to do." The humans worked quickly, analyzing the plague, tracing its origins and searching for a cure. Their technology was advanced, but it was their sheer stubbornness that impressed the Velari. They refused to accept defeat. When an antidote failed, they created another. When a victim was too far gone, they still fought to keep them alive. They weren't just trying to help. They were willing to fight against death itself. Then, a shocking discovery was made. The disease wasn't natural. It had been engineered. The data collected from infected samples showed traces of artificial manipulation, designed to be unstoppable. It was a biological weapon, one created with precision and purpose, and the evidence pointed directly to the Galactic Council. The same council that had abandoned the Velari had also ensured their demise. It was not a mere accident or an unfortunate event. It was a silent execution. Carter and his team shared their findings with Valen, and for the first time in weeks, the Chancellor felt something other than despair. He felt rage. The Velari had not simply been abandoned. They had been murdered in cold blood. His species had been chosen for extinction, and the galaxy had watched it happen without lifting a finger. But now, the truth had been exposed, and the humans, the only ones who had come to their aid, were not about to let this crime go unanswered. As the antidote neared completion, the Galactic Council issued a warning to the Terran Republic: withdraw immediately or face consequences. But Carter laughed. We don't take orders from cowards. The human fleet, though smaller than the combined forces of the Council, stood firm. They had come to save lives, and they would not be intimidated into leaving. The Council had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they faced the possibility of war. Velon watched as the first Velari fully recovered from the disease. A child, no older than 10, stood up from his sickbed, his bright blue eyes filled with life once more. It was a sight that brought tears to Valen's eyes. They were not doomed. They were not lost. Because someone had cared. Because humanity had stayed. The Galactic Assembly Hall was silent. The great chamber, usually filled with the noise of arguments and political deals, now felt like a tomb. The representatives of hundreds of species sat motionless, their eyes fixed on the single figure standing at the center. Chancellor Varric of the Zorkai Alliance, one of the most powerful factions in the galaxy, had just issued an ultimatum. Humanity, he declared, his deep voice echoing across the hall. You have a choice. Submit to the Galactic Council's authority, surrender your warships, and disband your colonies beyond the designated borders, or be destroyed. His reptilian eyes gleamed with confidence. The message was clear. Humanity had no escape. For centuries, the Galactic Council had ruled the stars, controlling who could expand, who could trade, and who could thrive. They had tolerated humanity's rise only because they never saw them as a real threat. But humans were different. They didn't submit to traditions. They didn't accept limits. They kept pushing, expanding, inventing, and refusing to follow the unwritten laws that weaker species had learned to obey. And now, the Council had decided to crush them before they became unstoppable. It was supposed to be simple. Give humanity an impossible choice: slavery or annihilation. The hall remained deathly quiet as the human ambassador, a tall and calm figure named Elias Grant, took a deep breath. He glanced at the faces of the assembled alien leaders. Most looked at him with pity, some with amusement, and others with open hostility. He knew what they were thinking. Humanity was outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. But he didn't look afraid. Instead, he smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a ripple of unease through the room. He tapped his wrist communicator once, sending a silent signal. And then he spoke. Chancellor Varric, he said smoothly, his voice steady. Your demand is quite dramatic. But before we answer, let me ask you something. Do you truly believe humanity stands alone? Varric scoffed, his scaled lips curling in amusement. Of course, no species will stand with you against the Council. You are an anomaly, a mistake. The galaxy will not risk war for the sake of an arrogant, reckless race like yours. Murmurs of agreement swept through the hall. The other representatives nodded, their confidence returning. They had all seen the warnings, the threats, the sheer power the council commanded. Humanity could not win. This was the end. Elias Grant, however, did not look concerned. He placed a small device on the podium before him, activating it with a simple touch. A holographic projection appeared above him, a massive screen displaying something that froze the entire room. Fleet movements. Not just human ships, but vessels from dozens of species. Some of them were old allies of humanity, but others, many others, were supposed to be loyal to the Council. Yet here they were, mobilizing, gathering in deep space, preparing for something that should have been impossible. Varric's confidence shattered in an instant. This is a trick, he hissed, but his voice lacked the certainty it had before. Elias leaned forward. No trick, Chancellor. You made a mistake. You assumed humanity was alone, that we had no friends, no allies. But you never considered the most important thing. We don't just make allies. We inspire revolutions. He let the words sink in before continuing. Do you know why so many species have joined us? Because they are tired. Tired of being controlled. Tired of being told how far they can expand, how much they can trade, how long they can survive. You thought you were issuing an ultimatum to a dying species, but what you have actually done, he gestured to the hologram, is unite the greatest rebellion the galaxy has ever seen. A wave of panic spread through the chamber. The representatives whispered among themselves, their fear growing by the second. The Council had always ruled through strength, through fear, through the belief that no one could challenge them. But now, that illusion was breaking. If humanity was not only standing defiant, but also gathering an army, then everything the Council had built was crumbling. Varric slammed his fist against the podium. You cannot win. The Council controls the strongest fleets, the largest armies. Do we? A new voice interrupted. It was not Elias, but another ambassador, this time from the Urath Dominion, a species that had long been under the Council's control. The Urath representative, a slender figure with golden skin, stood up, his eyes locked onto Varric. You believe the Council is invincible, that no one will dare to rise against you. But you forget, we have watched humanity fight before. And unlike you, we have learned from them. He turned to Elias and nodded. The Urath stand with humanity. The room erupted into chaos. More voices rose, one after another. The Jorathi, the Velari, the Toval, dozens of species, all once subjugated by the Council, now declared their allegiance to the rebellion. The balance of power shifted in an instant. What was supposed to be humanity's surrender had become the Council's greatest nightmare. Elias stepped back, his jaw complete. He had not come to beg for mercy. He had come to reveal the truth. So, Chancellor Varric, he said with a smirk, it seems that the answer to your ultimatum is no. Varric's claws dug into the podium as he realized what had happened. The Council had miscalculated. Humanity had given them an answer they had never expected. And now, the galaxy would never be the same. The Galactic Council had always presented itself as the supreme authority of the known universe, a force of order and justice that maintained peace among the countless species spread across the stars. It was an ancient institution, one that had existed for thousands of years, shaping the fate of civilizations, deciding who would rise and who would fall. For a long time, humanity had believed in its authority. They'd followed its laws, abided by its regulations, and trusted in its promises. But trust is a fragile thing, and once broken, it can never be repaired. Humanity had always been an outlier, a species that rose too fast, advanced too quickly, and refused to be controlled like the others. At first, the Council had tried to contain them through diplomacy, then through restrictions, and finally, through outright sabotage. But nothing worked. Humans were stubborn, relentless, and worst of all, unpredictable. So the Council made a decision, a final, irreversible decision. Humanity had to be eliminated. The betrayal came in the dead of night. The outermost human colonies, thriving worlds full of life and progress, suddenly fell silent. Entire planets wiped out in an instant. No warning, no declaration of war, only devastation. It was not an invasion, it was extermination. The Council's fleets, once seen as protectors, turned their weapons against the very species they had sworn to guide. The official reports called it an unfortunate accident, a misunderstanding, a tragic consequence of an unknown threat. But humanity knew better. The Council had made their intentions clear. The only question was, what would humanity do now? At first, there was confusion. The United Terran Command, the governing body of humanity, struggled to comprehend the scale of the attack. Billions were dead, entire cities reduced to nothing, and the Council refused to answer their desperate transmissions. Then, a message finally arrived, not an apology, not an explanation, but an order. Humanity is to surrender all military assets immediately and submit to full occupation for the safety of the galaxy. The words were cold, emotionless, and final. It was a demand, not a request. The Council did not expect resistance. They believed that humanity would crumble under the sheer weight of their power, but the Council had underestimated them. On a secret base hidden deep within an asteroid field, the remaining leaders of humanity gathered in a dimly lit chamber. They were battered, broken, and filled with grief, but not defeated. Admiral Leon Carter, an old war veteran with steel-gray eyes, stood at the center of the room. His voice was quiet, but there was no mistaking the fire in his words. "They think we are finished," he said, looking at each face in the room. "They think we will bow, accept their betrayal, and fade into history, but they have forgotten who we are." His fist slammed against the table. "They have made one mistake, one they will regret for the rest of their existence. They left some of us alive." A hush fell over the room as his words settled in. Humanity had never started this war, but now they had no choice. The Council had drawn first blood, and there was only one way this could end. Survival was no longer enough. Revenge was inevitable. The response was swift. Across the scattered remnants of humanity, ships were prepared, weapons were forged, and alliances were formed. The Council had expected a dying race to surrender, not a species that fought even harder when pushed into a corner. The first retaliation came like a whisper in the dark. Small outposts of the Council mysteriously vanished. Patrol fleets disappeared without a trace, and supply lines were cut with terrifying precision. The Council dismissed it as minor resistance, nothing more than the final death throes of a broken civilization. But then came the real attack. In a single night, a massive human fleet emerged from the void, striking at the heart of the Council's strongest military base. The battle was over before it even truly began. The Council had never fought an enemy like humanity before. Their strategies were unpredictable, their tactics ruthless, and their determination unbreakable. The fleet moved like a storm, destroying everything in its path, sending a message that could not be ignored. Humanity was not just alive. They were coming for vengeance. Panic spread through the Council like wildfire. The betrayal that was meant to secure their power had instead ignited a war unlike any they had ever faced. Desperate meetings were held in secret chambers. Leaders argued and blamed one another, but no solution could change the truth. The moment they had turned against humanity, they had sealed their own fate. And deep down, they all knew it. The humans would not stop. They would not forget. They would not forgive. The final confrontation came on the capital world of the Council itself, a planet that had stood untouched for millennia. It was there that the last remnants of the Council's power made their stand, expecting humanity to show restraint, to negotiate, to seek peace. But humanity had learned their lesson. There was no negotiating with those who sought their destruction. As the first human warships entered the planet's orbit, the Council finally understood the full weight of their betrayal. They had turned on a species that never stopped fighting. And now, nothing could save them. The war was not just about survival anymore. It was about justice. It was about making sure that no one, no empire, no council, no power would ever again believe they could control the fate of humanity. The council had made their choice. Now, humanity would make theirs. And as the first shots of the final battle were fired, the galaxy watched in silence, knowing that things would never be the same again. The galaxy had always been a vast and dangerous place, ruled by empires that thrived on power and dominance. For centuries, alliances had formed and crumbled, wars had been fought and forgotten, and species had risen and fallen. Yet through it all, the Galactic Union had remained the supreme authority, a coalition of the strongest civilizations that dictated the rules of the cosmos. Humanity, a relatively young species, had once been a part of this grand alliance. They had contributed their knowledge, their technology, and their resources, believing in the idea of unity. But the truth was far uglier than they had ever imagined. Humanity had never truly been accepted. They were tolerated, used when necessary, but never trusted. And when the time came for the Union to make a decision, it started with a war that humanity never sought but could not avoid. The Zorthan Empire, a species known for their brutal conquests, had declared humanity an obstacle to their expansion. They launched an invasion unlike any other, striking deep into human space, reducing colonies to rubble, and slaughtering billions. Earth's leaders had called upon the Galactic Union, pleading for aid, invoking the treaties and agreements that had once bound them together. But the response was silence. No fleets arrived, no reinforcements came. The Union had made their choice. Humanity was left to fight alone. At first, there was disbelief. The leaders of Earth struggled to understand why their allies had abandoned them. Had they not stood side by side in countless battles? Had they not honored every treaty, every agreement? But the truth became clear soon enough. Humanity was never considered an equal. The Union saw them as expendable, a species that had grown too fast, too strong, and too independent. The Zorthan Empire had offered them a deal: stay out of the war, let humanity burn, and in return, their own territories would be spared. And the Union had accepted without hesitation. The betrayal was absolute. The message was clear: humanity was alone. And so, they did what they had always done. They fought. The Zorthans had expected an easy victory, a swift conquest that would end with humanity kneeling before them. But they had made a terrible mistake. Humans were not like the others. They did not surrender, they did not break, and when pushed to the edge, they only became more dangerous. Every city that fell became a battleground. Every colony that burned became a symbol of defiance. The war was supposed to last months. It dragged on for years. The Zorthans, with their overwhelming fleets and superior numbers, should have crushed humanity. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a war that drained them of their strength, their resources, and their will. Humanity did not fight like an empire. They fought like a species with nothing left to lose. The Union watched in silence, expecting humanity to collapse at any moment. But as the years passed, something terrifying happened. Humanity was not just surviving. They were winning. Their fleets, once on the defensive, began striking deep into enemy territory. Their soldiers, hardened by endless battles, became legends even among their enemies. The Zorthans, once so confident in their victory, now found themselves retreating, their forces shattered, their empire crumbling. And then the moment came, the final battle, the last stand of the Zorthan Empire. It was fought in the cold darkness of space, where thousands of ships clashed in a war that would decide the fate of both species. The Zorthans threw everything they had into the fight. But it was not enough. Humanity had endured too much, suffered too greatly, and lost too many to accept anything less than total victory. When the dust settled, the Zorthan Empire was no more. Their worlds were in ruins, their fleets destroyed, their leaders executed. Humanity had stood alone, and yet they had triumphed. The war was over, but the galaxy had changed forever. The Union, once so confident in their decision, now faced a new reality. Humanity, the species they had abandoned, was no longer just another member of the galactic community. They were something far more dangerous. They were survivors. They were warriors. They were the ones who had defied an empire and emerged stronger than ever. And now, as humanity looked out at the stars, they understood the truth. They did not need the Union. They did not need alliances built on lies and betrayal. They had proven that they could stand alone. And from that moment on, they would never bow to anyone again. The war had left scars across the galaxy, scars that would never fully heal. Planets lay in ruins, entire civilizations had crumbled, and the echoes of battle still lingered in the void. Among the countless worlds that had suffered, one stood on the edge of total annihilation, the planet Vorthal, home to a once thriving race known as the Vortheni. Once proud and powerful, the Vortheni had been reduced to near extinction. Their cities turned to dust, their fleets shattered. No one came to their aid, no allies stood by them. And the Galactic Union, the so-called protector of peace, had deemed them a lost cause. The Vortheni had fought against the wrong enemy. They had fought against humanity. It had not always been this way. The Vortheni had once been among the strongest members of the Galactic Union. Their influence vast, their technology unmatched. When war had broken out, they had sided against humanity, believing the young species to be reckless, dangerous, and too ambitious for their own good. They had sent their fleets to crush human resistance, expecting an easy victory. But what they had encountered was something no one had predicted. Humanity did not break. They did not surrender. Instead, they fought back with a ferocity that shook the entire galaxy. What should have been a swift war turned into a nightmare. The Vortheni, like so many others, had underestimated the resilience of humanity. And when the tide of war changed, when the once dominant forces of the Galactic Union began to crumble under humanity's relentless assault, the Vortheni were left vulnerable. Their so-called allies turned their backs on them, unwilling to risk their own survival for a species that had lost its strength. Now Vorthal was dying. The remnants of their people struggled to survive, their once great cities reduced to nothing more than ruins. Famine, disease, and lawlessness had taken over, and the few remaining survivors lived in constant fear of extinction. The stars above held no mercy, only silence. The Union had abandoned them. The other species had ignored them. And humanity, the very enemy they had once sought to destroy, had every reason to finish what was left of them. But then something happened that no one in the galaxy could have predicted. The human fleet arrived. At first, the Vortheni believed it was the end. The massive human warships hovered above their broken cities, their weapons capable of wiping out what little remained of their race. There was no way to fight back, no means to resist. But the attack never came. Instead, the humans did something unthinkable. They landed. They brought supplies, food, medicine, clean water. They restored power to cities that had been dark for years. They healed the sick, protected the weak, and rebuilt what had been lost. The Vortheni could not understand it. Why? Why would humanity, their sworn enemy, show them mercy? Why would they offer aid instead of destruction? The answer came from the human commander who led the operation, a man named Admiral Cole. When the Vortheni leaders, weak and desperate, asked him why he had come, his response left them speechless. Because we remember. He spoke of the past, of an event long forgotten by most of the galaxy, generations ago, before the war, before the betrayal, before humanity had become a power to be feared. There had been a time when Earth had faced extinction. A cataclysmic event had nearly wiped out human civilization, and in those dark days, only one race had come to their aid, the Vortheni. They had sent ships, supplies, and technology, expecting nothing in return. They had saved humanity when no one else would. And though the years had passed, Though war had turned them into enemies, humanity had never forgotten. A debt that cannot be repaid, Admiral Cole said, but we will try. The Vorthani, once proud and unyielding, now stood humbled before their former enemy. They had fought against humans, had sought to destroy them, yet it was humanity that had come to their rescue. It was humanity that had shown them compassion when the rest of the galaxy had turned away. And in that moment, the Vorthani realized the true nature of those they had once feared. Humanity was not just a species of warriors. They were not just conquerors or survivors. They were something far more dangerous. They were those who never forgot, those who never abandoned their own values, no matter how much the galaxy had wronged them. As the years passed, Vorthal slowly began to rebuild, not as a fallen empire, but as a humbled race that had learned the true cost of war. And though the scars of the past would never fully fade, one thing became clear. The debt the Vorthani had once given had been repaid, not with war, not with vengeance, but with something far more powerful. With humanity's mercy.